world's sole superpower, quietly asked for a ceasefire from a nation it had been bombing for 10 straight days. And they were rejected.
Rejected on live television.
Right. Not in some smoke-filled back room in Geneva, not through quiet back-channel diplomatic cables, live on American television for the entire world to see.
We really need to pause on that image, right out of the gate, because this is not just a military rejection. This is it's a profound, earth-shattering game changer. That single moment on live TV has effectively shattered global economic stability. It's closed the world's most critical energy choke point and triggered a geopolitical earthquake that is fundamentally restructuring the balance of power on the planet as we speak.
Welcome to the Hot News Channel, where we strip away the noise to analyze today's breaking stories. It is Tuesday, March 10th, 2026. Today, we're looking at day 10 of what was supposed to be a lightning-fast campaign, Operation Epic Fury, the joint U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran. We've got a massive stack of intelligence transcripts, geopolitical assessments, and strategic commentary from leading global analysts sitting on the desk today.
And for you, the listener, the mission of today's deep dive is to decode the hidden truths that the mainstream headlines are entirely missing. We are going to look at the covert casualty numbers, the destruction of multi-billion-dollar radar systems, the ascension of a deeply hardened new Iranian supreme leader, and the catastrophic global oil shock that is literally unfolding right outside your window.
Yeah, but before we jump into the hard data, we do need to issue a mandatory neutrality disclaimer. The intelligence and expert analyses being discussed today contain highly polarized, politically charged viewpoints regarding the United States, Israel, and Iran. We want to be absolutely clear to you, the listener. The Hot News Channel does not endorse any side, any nation, or any political ideology.
Right.
Our mission today is strictly to impartially report, synthesize, and analyze the claims made by the experts in the provided intelligence. We are here to find the objective reality on the ground, nothing more, nothing less.
With those ground rules set, let's unpack this pivotal moment that we mentioned at the top. 10 days ago, the stated goals of this operation were unambiguous. The public and private briefings promised fast, overwhelming, decisive strikes.
The clean sweep.
Exactly. The operational promise was a clean, massive decapitation strike meant to kill Iranian leadership, collapse the government from within, completely eliminate the Iranian nuclear program, and allow the United States and Israel to declare total victory in just 6 days.
That was the pitch sold to the world.
Yes.
But the reality on day 10 is starkly different. There's been no regime collapse. There's been no internal revolt. The nuclear program hasn't been eliminated. Instead, Iran responded by launching 500 ballistic missiles and 2,000 drones across Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Israel. And that brings us to the moment that has Washington completely frozen.
Right. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi going on NBC's Meet the Press.
Meet the Press. On a Sunday morning.
Watched by millions of Americans, the timing and the venue were deeply intentional.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He used that platform to publicly, clearly, and unequivocally reject a back-channel ceasefire request from the United States.
It's a moment that should have stopped every newsroom on the planet. To understand the gravity of this, we have to analyze exactly why Iran said no. If you listen to the mainstream coverage right now, the instinct is to frame this rejection as, mere stubbornness or religious ideology or the military wing refusing to let the politicians govern.
Right.
But according to the analysis by Abbas Araghchi himself, the reasoning is deeply strategic. It's based on a documented pattern of historical events. He explicitly stated that past negotiations have been traps.
And he didn't just speak in generalities either. He provided specific dates, which is where the data gets fascinating.
He pointed to June 2025 during the 12-day war. A ceasefire was floated, Iran paused its retaliatory strikes in good faith, and then the U.S. launched Operation Midnight Hammer. But the most recent and devastating example is from just last month. On February 25, 2026, Iran's foreign minister publicly stated that a diplomatic deal was within reach during active negotiations in Geneva.
And the Omani mediators were reportedly thrilled, right? Concessions were actively being made on both sides.
Yes. Then, just 3 days later, on February 28, American and Israeli bombs fell on Tehran, initiating Operation Epic Fury.
So from the perspective of Tehran, the very word ceasefire has two entirely conflicting definitions depending on who is saying it.
Precisely. To the United States, a ceasefire currently means a necessary pause. It means stopping the bleeding, stabilizing domestic gas prices before the midterms, buying time to reassess a failing military strategy, and, reloading the missile tubes.
But to Iran,
To Iran, after experiencing those previous attacks during active negotiations, a ceasefire means a lethal trap. It means lowering their guard so the attacking side can reposition for round 3. Arachi stated point blank that they will not accept a pause unless it comes with a permanent, structural end to the war and a complete U.S. withdrawal from the Gulf. They want guaranteed irreversibility.
But here is where the data shows a dynamic conflict in the Iranian approach. And I want to push back on this because it seems totally contradictory.
Go ahead.
On one hand, you have the Iranian foreign minister demanding total withdrawal and rejecting peace talks on American television.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, just days prior, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian actually stood up publicly and apologized to the Gulf states for Iranian strikes hitting their territory.
He did.
He offered a very clear de-escalation gesture. He said Iran would stop attacking neighboring countries if those countries stopped allowing their territory to be used by the U.S. for strikes against Iran.
It looks like total chaos to an outsider.
Yeah.
You have the president offering an olive branch, and within hours of that peace gesture, the Iranian military launched another massive wave of strikes on those exact same Gulf countries.
Right. Makes no sense.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of Iranian military doctrine, it is entirely by design. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, operates on a highly decentralized command structure.
So they aren't sitting around waiting for a phone call from the president before they launch a missile.
Not at all. Lower-level IRGC regional commanders have autonomous operational authority. They have standing orders to keep the pressure sustained, to keep firing, specifically to prevent a scenario where a diplomatic signal from a civilian politician gets mistaken for a ceasefire commitment by the military. The infrastructure executing the strikes will not automatically stop just because the diplomatic wing makes an offer on television. The political chain of command for peace and the military chain of command for war are deliberately disconnected at the bottom. This ensures that a moment of diplomatic hesitation doesn't open up a vulnerable window for an incoming American stealth bomber.
That rigid separation between the diplomats making peace and the military waging war is fascinating, especially when you consider what was happening inside Tehran at that exact moment. The civilian government was trying to function, but the very top of their leadership pyramid had just been obliterated.
Right, and this is the event that truly kicked off this entire timeline, February 28th, the first night of Operation Epic Fury. The U.S. and Israel executed what was supposed to be a surgical decapitation strike, and they succeeded in their primary tactical objective. They assassinated Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei.
Which, just to pause on that for a second for the listener, that is an earth-shattering geopolitical event. Ali Khamenei had been the supreme leader since 1989. You were talking about wiping out an institution, not just a man. The intelligence assessments provided to Washington predicted that removing him would cause the entire Iranian regime to fold in on itself.
The working theory in Western intelligence was that a power vacuum would spark massive infighting. They thought the military would fracture into competing factions and the civilian population would rise up and overthrow whatever was left.
But the intelligence we were reviewing today shows a massive, historic miscalculation.
A total misread.
We didn't see regime collapse. Instead, we saw a chillingly quiet, highly orchestrated transition. Almost a week later, overnight between March 8 and March 9, the Assembly of Experts, which is this deeply conservative 88-member Islamic body responsible for choosing the leader, went on state television. And they didn't announce a fragmented ruling council. They announced a new, absolute ruler, 56-year-old Mojtaba Khamenei.
The assassinated leader's son.
His son.
And to understand the gravity of what the U.S. and Israel are now dealing with, you have to look at the personal toll of those initial strikes. Mojtaba didn't just lose his father in that bombing.
No.
The bunker strikes wiped out his mother, his wife, his son, his sister, and his brother-in-law.
Wow. So from a psychological standpoint, the coalition just handed the keys of a heavily militarized nation to a man who literally has nothing left to lose.
This raises a profoundly important question about the strategic implications of the succession. According to analysis by Pepe Escobar and Trita Parsi, the U.S. and Israel may have made a catastrophic error. By eliminating Ali Khamenei, they removed a leader who, over 3 decades, actually acted as a balancing force between the extreme hardliners and the relative moderates.
That's a crucial point. Ali Khamenei upheld a strict religious fatwa ruling against the development and use of nuclear weapons.
He publicly and repeatedly viewed the creation of a nuclear bomb as a sin against Islam.
He did.
But now you have replaced him with his son, Mojtaba. Mojtaba is deeply embedded in the IRGC and the vast Iranian intelligence apparatus. He has operated in the shadows for decades. He is universally viewed as a hardliner among hardliners. But more importantly, from a human psychological standpoint, you have a man who has just had his entire family wiped out by foreign bombs.
So what does this mean for that nuclear fatwa?
Exactly. If Mojtaba believes that acquiring a nuclear deterrent is the only possible way to ensure the survival of his nation and to avenge the eradication of his bloodline, the religious barrier that existed under his father may vanish overnight.
The intelligence assessments regarding the Iranian public's reaction to all of this are also fiercely debated in the materials we have. According to geopolitical expert Larry Johnson, assassinating a national leader almost never causes the population to turn on their government. Historically, it unites them.
Yeah, he compared the current unity of the Iranian public to the way the American public reacted on September 12, 2001. A nation attacked from the outside closes ranks.
The classic rally around the flag effect.
Exactly.
But that directly contradicts the core intelligence that apparently drove the U.S. administration to launch this war in the first place. There was a highly circulated polling operation reportedly utilizing a Canadian VPN network to bypass Iranian internet controls, which claimed that 80% of Iranians hated the government and actively wanted regime change. The belief was that the U.S. Air Force would be treated as liberators.
And this is where rigorous critical thinking is essential in a world dominated by information warfare. If we look at the actual demographics of Iran, Persians and Azeris make up over 80% of the population. The new supreme leader, Mojtaba, is ethnically Azeri. The narrative pushed in Washington that there is a massive ethnic or social rift ready to organically fracture the country under military pressure simply isn't playing out on the ground.
So the data was bad.
The Canadian VPN polling data was heavily compromised. It was allegedly financed by organizations with long histories of backing color revolutions, essentially acting as cutouts for foreign intelligence agencies to manufacture a narrative that justified the war.
I do have to push back slightly there, because we are still seeing former U.S. officials and advisors incredibly close to the current administration stating publicly on Sunday shows that Mojtaba's reign won't last long. They are insisting that the Iranian people fundamentally want Western-style freedom, and that this decapitation strike is the necessary catalyst for that, even if it looks messy and violent in the short term.
We have to look at the objective reality on the streets of Tehran right now, not the hopeful, curated projections of Washington think tanks.
Fair point.
The reality is that millions of Iranians are in the streets showing profound grief and support. We saw the immediate, swift alignment of the Iranian military. The IRGC pledged absolute, unquestioning loyalty to Mojtaba within hours of the announcement. There was no civil war.
And internationally.
Furthermore, we saw prompt, highly public congratulations from major global players who matter in that region. Russia's Vladimir Putin and Azerbaijan's Ilham Aliyev immediately recognized and congratulated the new supreme leader. This is not the behavior of a state in the midst of collapse. This is a state hardening its shell, consolidating power, and preparing for a long war.
And that hardened state is currently holding the global economy hostage. Let's shift and look at the economic doomsday scenario unfolding right now, specifically the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The hard data we are looking at is frankly terrifying.
It really is.
Oil has surged past $100 a barrel. It briefly touched $109 over the weekend, which marks the largest single-week surge in oil trading history, dating back to 1983. And energy analysts are currently modeling scenarios where it hits 150 or even 200 plus per barrel if this lasts even a few more weeks.
Because the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed.
For the listener who might not be looking at a map, this narrow waterway between Oman and Iran handles 20 to 25% of all global oil supply. Right now, there are roughly 3,200 commercial ships sitting idle in the surrounding waters. They cannot move. And it's not just because they are afraid of being hit by a stray missile. It's because maritime insurance premiums have skyrocketed to impossible levels. It's a total freeze.
We really need to explain the mechanics of that because people think ships just sail. They don't. Commercial shipping relies on complex maritime insurance. If a shipping lane is declared an active war zone, the insurers pull the coverage or raise the premium to a point where the cost of the insurance is higher than the value of the cargo itself.
So it literally costs more to insure the oil than the oil is worth.
Exactly. And without insurance, a supertanker legally cannot dock at most major ports in the world. They become floating liabilities, so they just drop anchor and wait.
And the dominoes are falling fast. Bahrain has officially declared force majeure. For those unfamiliar, force majeure is a legal clause in a contract that essentially means an act of God, or an unforeseeable, unavoidable catastrophe has occurred. It legally allows Bahrain to break their export contracts without penalty because the situation is completely out of their control. On top of that, Qatar's liquefied natural gas, or LNG, exports are completely halted.
Which is massive.
That instantly removes 20% of the global LNG supply offline, right as Europe is trying to manage its energy grids. And here is the craziest data point in this economic section. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE are actually slashing their oil production right now. They're turning the pumps off because their physical storage tanks are completely full, the ships aren't coming to take the oil away, and they literally have nowhere else to put it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the cascading global effects are apocalyptic. According to the assessment by Professor Jeffrey Sachs and military analyst Douglas McGregor, a sustained disruption pushing oil to $200 a barrel doesn't just mean you pay more for gas at the pump in California or Texas, it means the collapse of global agriculture.
How does oil pricing directly collapse food?
The modern global food system, which manages to feed 8 billion people, relies entirely on cheap energy. It relies on fuel-heavy machinery to plant and harvest, fuel-dependent global transportation networks to move the food, and petrochemical-dependent fertilizers to grow it. At $200 a barrel, the input costs for a farmer skyrocket. That translates directly into food prices that hundreds of millions of people in developing nations simply cannot afford.
So it's a starvation issue.
It triggers mass starvation, which inevitably triggers mass migration and government collapses.
And the impact on Asia is immediate and dire. Japan relies on the Strait of Hormuz for 75% of its oil. South Korea, India, China, they're all heavily dependent on this single choke point.
Which raises an incredibly tense question. How long until these Asian superpowers are forced to intervene? They cannot survive a sustained closure. China is the manufacturing hub of the world, and they import roughly 90% of their oil. Japan is being warned by internal analysts that they could run out of strategic reserves in a matter of months.
So this isn't just a Middle Eastern conflict anymore.
No, this shifts the war from a regional conflict to a global survival crisis. If Japan's economy grinds to a halt because there is no fuel to run the power plants, Tokyo will have to exert unimaginable pressure on Washington to stop the bombing.
And internally, the Gulf states are panicking. Oman, which is historically the region's quietest, most careful diplomat, the Switzerland of the Middle East, issued an unprecedented public statement calling the U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran the worst aggression in the region's modern history.
When Oman speaks like that in public, shedding their neutral posture, the private conversations happening in the royal palaces in Riyadh, in Doha, in Abu Dhabi must be absolutely frantic. The Gulf states are realizing a terrifying truth. The massive U.S. military bases that were built on their soil over the last 30 years to protect them are now the exact reason they are being targeted. They are absorbing the collateral damage of a war they didn't start and desperately don't want.
But the U.S. administration claims they are actively protecting these waterways. If you watch the press briefings, they are talking about managing the crisis, implementing short-term strategic pauses, and mitigating the economic fallout. They are projecting to the American public that this is under control, that the Navy is clearing the lanes.
The intelligence assessments sharply disagree with that narrative. This isn't a temporary disruption that a few destroyers can clear up. This is a deliberate, highly calculated Iranian strategy of attrition. Iran is not trying to win a conventional set-piece naval battle against the U.S. Navy. They know they can't.
Well,
They are actively leveraging strikes on vulnerable civilian and economic infrastructure, like hitting the massive desalination plants that provide the only source of drinking water to Bahrain and triggering major oil refinery fires to create unbearable economic and humanitarian pressure. They want to force the Gulf states and the Asian economies to scream at Washington to end the war. It's asymmetric economic warfare, and based on the panic in the markets, it is working flawlessly.
that concept of asymmetry leads us perfectly into the battlefield data we have. Let's look at the hard data of Iran's latest barrage. On the night of Mojtaba's ascension to supreme leader, Iran launched Operation True Promise 4. This was their 30th wave of missiles since the war began 10 days ago. They utilized a mix of Khorramshahr ballistic missiles, Fatah hypersonic missiles, and Kamar missiles. And we are seeing reports of cluster munitions and massive one-ton warheads being used.
we need to break down why that shift in weaponry is incredibly significant. For the first 9 days, we saw mostly drones and lighter missiles. Now they are bringing out the heavy one-ton warheads.
Right, and they are hitting exceptionally high-value targets. The Tel Aviv power grids have suffered massive rolling outages. The Haifa oil refinery was struck, and footage of that lit up the night sky across the entire region. And there are heavily reported, though unverified by official Israeli military sensors, strikes on a massive underground wartime leadership bunker in Tel Aviv.
The bunker strikes are key.
But perhaps the most shocking data point in this entire stack of intelligence is the U.S. losses. Iran has systematically hunted down and destroyed 5 critical U.S. radar systems, specifically the FTS and TST models. These systems cost between $500 million and $1 billion each.
Consider the technology gap there. How did they destroy these billion-dollar technological marvels, the pride of the American defense industry?
With slow-moving Shahed drones that cost maybe $20,000 and sound like flying mopeds, the destruction of these radars has effectively blinded the defense network. It has dropped the early warning times for incoming ballistic missiles in Israel from a comfortable 30 minutes down to just 1 single minute.
It is a devastating blow, and what's deeply concerning here is the sheer exhaustion of the U.S. and Israeli air defense architecture. According to the analysis by military analyst Stanislav Krapivnik, the interceptor stockpiles for the T-8 systems and the Patriot PAC-2 and PAC-3 batteries are severely depleted.
For the listener, THAAD stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. It's designed to shoot down ballistic missiles right as they re-enter the atmosphere. And Patriot PAC-3s are the advanced point defense systems. These are the absolute best shields the West has to offer.
They are the best, but the math simply does not work in favor of the defense in a war of attrition. The U.S. Defense Industrial Base only manufactures about 35 to 40 Patriot missiles and roughly 10 THAAD interceptors per month. That is the maximum capacity right now.
Wait, let me just repeat that so the math sinks in.
Go ahead.
They make 45 high-end interceptors a month, but in just the first 6 days of this conflict, the U.S. and Israel burned through an estimated 3,600 various defensive missiles trying to stop the Iranian swarms. They're firing multi-million-dollar interceptors at incredibly cheap drones just to keep the skies clear, and they're literally running out of bullets.
Exactly the problem. It's like draining a massive bank account to pay off pennies of debt, and your paycheck isn't big enough to replenish the account. And because the defense shields are now degraded and the billion-dollar early warning radars are blinded, Iran is executing a major tactical shift. They don't need to rely solely on cheap drone swarms to overwhelm the system anymore. They know the skies are open, so they're upgrading to those heavy one-ton ballistic warheads you mentioned earlier.
The Kaibar missiles.
Yes. These are not harassment weapons. These are weapons capable of leveling entire city blocks, cratering critical infrastructure, and turning developed areas like Haifa into disaster zones.
But the counterargument we are seeing from the Pentagon is that the U.S. military doesn't just play defense. They are heavily touting their high-tech sensor shooter network. The idea is that using advanced low-Earth orbit satellites and F-35 stealth fighters, they can identify the infrared heat signatures of Iranian missile launchers the absolute second they appear on the surface and destroy them before they can fire a second shot. It's being described almost like a video game. Total situational awareness.
That is a highly advanced capability, and it works wonderfully against a conventional army sitting in an open desert. But we must counter that with the reality of Iran's preparation. Iran has spent over 20 years preparing for this exact war with the United States. They didn't build their military to fight on an open plain. They have built vast subterranean missile cities deep inside the Zagros mountain ranges.
Deep underground.
Yes. They can roll a mobile launcher out of a reinforced tunnel, fire a hypersonic missile, and retreat back underground under hundreds of feet of solid rock in a matter of minutes, long before an F-35 can drop a payload. Furthermore, they are extensively utilizing decoys, literally painting fake aircraft and launchers on the ground or building cheap plywood mock-ups with heat generators inside them to absorb multi-million-dollar Western munitions.
So the sensors are shooting at plywood?
Often, yes. The U.S. sensor shooter network is impressive, but Iran is proving that air superiority and high-tech sensors alone cannot win a protracted war of attrition against a dug-in, decentralized, and highly disciplined enemy.
Which brings us to perhaps the most heavily guarded secret of this entire war, and the one that will have the most profound domestic impact. Let's look at the casualty cover-up and the information warfare currently raging. We need to contrast the official numbers coming out of the Pentagon with the intelligence leaks pouring out of Europe and the Middle East.
This is critical.
Officially, as of today, USCENTCOM confirms only 7 American soldiers have been killed, with rumors of an eighth. On the other side, Iran's state media claims to have killed over 500 U.S. service members in their missile barrages on regional bases.
A massive, almost absurd discrepancy in the narrative.
But the conservative leak data, the intelligence we have from medical logistics chains, is where it gets highly specific and very dark. Intelligence suggests that at least 135 severely wounded American soldiers have been quietly medevaced out of the region. They're reportedly being flown not to domestic U.S. hospitals where the press could see them, but to floating triage hospitals on aircraft carriers out at sea, and to the massive NATO medical facility in Stuttgart, Germany.
That changes the picture entirely.
Meanwhile, the Iranian civilian toll is catastrophic and very public. Tehran's health ministry reports over 1,200 civilians killed by coalition bombing, including a horrifying strike on a school in southern Iran that killed 170 children.
And the human cost isn't just from the high explosives. The environmental toll is functioning as a secondary silent weapon. Atmospheric chemist Gabriel da Silva analyzed the phenomenon being called black rain that is currently falling over Tehran. He confirmed that the rain is completely saturated with toxic hydrocarbons, sulfur dioxide, and carcinogenic PM2.5 particles.
For the layman, PM2.5 refers to particulate matter that is microscopic, so small that when you breathe it in, it bypasses the lungs and goes directly into the bloodstream, causing massive cardiovascular and respiratory failure.
It is lethal over time. This black rain is the direct result of the coalition bombing massive Iranian oil depots and refineries. The smoke plumes block out the sun and then fall back to the earth as toxic sludge. It's essentially a chemical attack via environmental fallout, and the long-term cancer rates for the civilians breathing this in will be generational.
And yet, despite the scale of this war, we are seeing an unprecedented level of strict censorship in the West regarding the damage. Commercial satellite imagery providers, the companies that normally sell pictures of the Earth to news organizations, have actively blacked out or delayed views of damaged U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria. Furthermore, Israeli citizens are under strict military gag orders restricting them from filming or posting visuals on social media of missile impacts or structural damage to their cities.
We must analyze the censorship from the perspective of Israeli journalist Orly Noy. She has written extensively in the Provided Intelligence about the remarkable lack of domestic opposition to the war within Israel, despite the escalating costs and the daily reality of tyrants. She notes that the Israeli public and mainstream media offer almost automatic, unquestioning support for military campaigns, creating an echo chamber where dissent is treated as treason.
And how does that apply here?
If we parallel that societal control to the United States, we see an administration highly motivated to hide the true gruesome costs of the war, the traumatic brain injuries, the amputations, the shattered lives of young American soldiers from the American public. The political goal is obvious: prevent a massive anti-war backlash right before the midterm elections, keep the war abstract and bloodless on television.
But I have to ask, as a proxy for the listener's own skepticism, in the modern digital age, with smartphones in every pocket and social media connecting everyone instantly, can the military really keep hundreds of casualties or severe injuries a secret? Wouldn't families be speaking out? Wouldn't doctors be leaking photos? It seems impossible to hide that level of carnage.
It sounds impossible to a civilian, but if we look at the actual mechanics of modern military operations, it is entirely feasible and routinely done. Soldiers in specialized or classified units are often required to sign strict non-disclosure agreements. The military uses classified assignment cutouts to compartmentalize the flow of information. If a soldier is severely wounded in a classified forward operating base, putting them on a floating triage center like an aircraft carrier keeps them completely isolated from the domestic press. They have no cell phone reception out there.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly the strategy, and we must draw a dark, sobering parallel here to the hidden numbers of Western casualties in the Ukraine conflict. According to the deep intelligence reports in our notes, there are credible claims that over 297,000 NATO-aligned soldiers, advisors, and mercenaries have died in that theater over the last few years. Yet those numbers are virtually invisible in Western media. Families are compensated quietly, strict NDAs are signed under threat of losing benefits, and the true human cost is classified under the guise of national security. It is highly probable, almost certain, that the exact same playbook of obfuscation is being utilized right now in the Middle East to manage public perception.
This level of strategic deception, both in the lead-up to the war and the management of the fallout, requires a long-term vision. This isn't just a spontaneous reaction to a border skirmish. Which brings us to the most vital question. Why did this war actually start? Let's trace the ideological origins of this conflict. According to the exhaustive historical analysis provided by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Operation Epic Fury is not a reaction to a sudden, imminent threat from Iran. It stems from a policy document drafted way back in 1996 known as the Clean Break Doctrine, which was authored by American neoconservatives for then Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
It was essentially a blueprint for total regional transformation.
Yes. The document argued that Israel should completely abandon the Oslo Accords, abandon the idea of land for peace, and instead secure its environment by militarily destabilizing and fragmenting all surrounding Arab states. Yeah. And we must pair that 1996 document with the post-9/11 strategy revealed by former NATO Supreme Commander General Wesley Clark. In 2001, just weeks after the Twin Towers fell, Clark was shown a classified Pentagon memo outlining a shocking plan to take out 7 countries in 5 years. Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and the ultimate final prize, Iran.
It's a generational project.
What's incredible and frankly tragic is that before Operation Epic Fury launched last month, the U.S. National Intelligence Council, which represents the consensus of all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies, issued a formal, highly classified assessment directly to the administration. That assessment warned them that a regime change operation in Iran was destined to fail catastrophically. It warned of the economic fallout, the military resilience of the IRGC, and the unlikelihood of a civilian uprising. Yet those warnings were entirely ignored by the political leadership.
If we synthesize this grand strategy, drawing on the insights from Sachs and the historical context of the Clean Break Doctrine, the picture becomes terrifyingly clear. This is not a war of necessity. It is not a war of self-defense. It is the violent culmination of a 30 to 40-year ideological project aiming to secure unquestioned U.S. global hegemony alongside absolute Israeli regional hegemony. The overarching goal of the Clean Break Doctrine was to permanently shatter any regional powers that could ever pose a threat to that order.
But Iran is not Libya. It's not Iraq in 2003, weak and isolated.
And that is why Iran is the ultimate stumbling block and why this operation is failing. You are talking about a nation of nearly 100 million people. You are dealing with a 3,000-year-old Persian civilization with immense national pride, backed by deep geographic advantages. The Zagros Mountains serve as natural fortresses that absorb bunker-busting bombs like mosquito bites. They possess a highly resilient, battle-tested military infrastructure that has spent decades studying American weaknesses. You cannot simply bomb a civilization of that size with that much depth into submission in 6 days. It is hubris of the highest order.
And the geopolitical fallout of that hubris is creating a massive global realignment as we speak.
It is accelerating the end of the unipolar world. China is sitting back, quietly watching U.S. military credibility erode in real time. They are securing their own energy deals with Russia while America burns its resources in the desert. Russia is actively providing satellite intelligence and advanced electronic jamming support to the Iranians, openly treating them as a strategic ally. And the global South countries across Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia are watching the Gulf states burn. They are realizing with absolute clarity that the United States cannot or will not protect its supposed allies when push comes to shove. The illusion of the omnipotent American security umbrella has evaporated.
So, to summarize the absolute vital takeaway from this deep dive, the United States and Israel plan a 6-day clean decapitation strike designed to topple the Iranian government, eliminate the nuclear threat, and pacify the Middle East forever. Instead, they achieved the exact disastrous opposite. They forged a highly unified, hardened Iranian state, now led by a grieving, uncompromising new supreme leader who literally holds the trigger to the global economy via the Strait of Hormuz.
And that leads to a chilling extrapolation that you, the listener, need to seriously mull over as you watch this week's headlines. As the United States rapidly depletes its finite, irreplaceable stockpiles of advanced air defense interceptors in the deserts of the Middle East, they are actively stripping critical defense assets away from the Pacific theater. How closely is China watching the severe erosion of American military capacity? And what does this depletion mean for the timeline of a potential conflict over Taiwan? Is the real, ultimate casualty of Operation Epic Fury not just the stability of the Middle East, but the definitive end of American global deterrence entirely?
If you found this analysis valuable, hit the plus or follow button on your podcast app and give us a like. Subscribe to the Hot News channel for more deep dives. Until we meet again, goodbye.